Hey guys, Mark here again from Mark's Oil Scale Trains. Thought I'd do a video today as well regarding the wiring that I'm going to be doing for this layout. Now, I'm going to start the wiring here relatively soon, and I'm going to be starting with the outer line that I have. And I'm going to be taking that wiring from the terminal strips that are behind the TIU on the other side of the wall there, and then going to track block sections on the layout. Now I do all of my wiring really based around the MTH TIU system. I run that wiring first, and then I plug in the base 3 unit that you see there, the Lionel Legacy unit, into the DCS, and that runs perfectly as well. But I start and revolve everything around the MTH DCS system because I run both. And the wiring for the DCS system is a little bit more involved because the track signal is read through the center rail, and the outer rail obviously is the negative side. But I do those track block sections to help with the signal and the power distribution for the MTH system and the MTH trains. And I'll show you how I'm doing that here in just a second. So the first thing I'll mention is the wire you see here is the only wire on the outer line powering that entire loop of track that I have up there. Now, I want to also point out that this is 16 gauge speaker wire that I had laying around, and it is temporary. Somebody in the comment section was appalled that I'm not using the stranded black and red cables, wires that you normally use. But again, this is temporary. I do have black and red 14 gauge stranded wire. I got it right there that I am going to be using for going from the terminal strips to the track block sections that I have on the layout above. But right now, this is just temporary. Now, the system runs actually pretty good. You've seen how large my loop of track is, and this is just one 16 gauge stranded wire that is running to the layout and powering that entire loop of track. Not recommended, but it is working. But my plan is to use that 14 gauge wire and go to each track block section that I have up there on the outer loop. So right now, that's my outer main line. This is going to be the inner line, main 2. Then I will have a third line and then a yard line as well that I'm doing. But I will show you how I do the track blocks, and we'll take a look at that and kind of, I guess, go from there and show you what I'm doing and how I'll do that around the entire track. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the track blocks in this section back here. Now, eventually this is all gonna be in a tunnel with an upper level here for scenery, but I'm gonna start right over here with the first track block that I'm gonna do. Now, when I do the track blocks, I usually do them in about 6 to 8 foot sections or somewhere in between. And the first cut is going to take 2 cuts so I can isolate this section, but I'm going to actually start right here. That's going to be the first cut that I'm going to make. And then I'm going to make the second cut right back over there in this area. And then it's going to isolate this section of track, and I'm going to run that 14 gauge stranded wire from the terminal strip underneath to this section, and it's going to isolate that signal from here to here. And then I'm going to subsequently go and do track blocks around that whole outside loop until I'm complete back over here. And then I'm going to do that on every line. But that's how I'm going to do, knock that over. That's how I'm going to do the first track block. Now I'm going to probably cut this offline. I don't need to bore everybody with the actual cutting, but I use a Dremel tool with a pretty thin wheel, and I'm going to make that cut. So I'll make the cut, and then I'll come back and show you the cut, and then tell you what I'm going to do with the gap after I make that cut. Okay, so I made this first cut here, but as you can see, I'm going to show you the cut real quick too. Let's get a little closer. You can see the cut on the center rail right there. But you see I still have power to the train. You can see the lights on the caboose, and that's because I haven't made the cut over there yet. Once I make that cut, it's going to isolate this section of track from all the others, and there will be no power here until I run that 14 gauge stranded wire I've got to this track. So I'm going to make the other cut, and I'll show you the result after that. And I know a lot of you guys know the track block systems, but for those that are starting a layout and don't really know why you would run the track blocks, well, this will kind of give you a good idea with the MTH system anyway. Okay, so I did make that second cut over here. You can see it there in the center rail. And that's isolating this entire section right to there from power. You can see there's no more lights on the train, on the caboose. But if I move it over to here, there you go. Now you see the lights come on, and we now have power to the train up to this point. And then nothing. If I just move it just over that, it comes on. So there's where the cut is, picking up power from this side, and the caboose is now powered in this section. So now if I was to run a train over this section, it would just stop because there's no power. And that's where I'm going to be running that 14 gauge stranded wire, separate wire that's going to power this section from that terminal strip underneath the layout, and that's going to give me power to that section. And what's nice about doing the track blocks, which I didn't mention before, is it helps you recognize if there are problems on your layout. With the MTH system, that gives a signal strength indicator on the remote. When you're running the train around, if you happen to get a low signal rating on that track block section, you'll know something's going on there, whether it's dirty or something else that may be causing the problem. But that's another good feature of running these track blocks along your layout, is that it helps you detect where you might have a problem. Now, once I do these and I do all of this, and even on my last layout, I've never really ever had a problem to where I had to go back and do something to a section, a track block section, to correct the problem, other than maybe cleaning it. But that is the track block first section that I'm doing. So I made the two cuts, one there and then one over yonder. Now the next one, I'm just gonna have to make one cut because that's already cut, and then I'm gonna come over to here and I'm gonna cut it right there, and that's gonna be the next track block that I run that power to. So I will run the wire, and I'll show you how I do that, soldering it onto the track there, which I might do that off camera, but I'll show you what I'm doing once it's complete, and that'll be in the next step. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got lights, we've got power to this first track block section on the layout, which was done on this, what is it? Today is August 11th of 2024. The first track block is completed. So I'll head under the layout now and I'll show you exactly what I did. I've got the wires soldered to the inside rail as well as the ground on the outside rail. But we'll trace it underneath, and you'll see the first completed wiring for the first track block on the layout. Okay, so here we are underneath. This is the terminal strip. That's spot number one. As you can see, I've got it going up. I drilled some holes here to run the cable through, or the wire through. And then I just got a little staple up there just to hold it, but it's nice and tight. Well, not too tight, but it's in there. It's nice and secured, I guess I should say. But we'll just trace it here as I shuffle along on my Harbor Freight little wheel caddy here, and going all the way down. Let me get this out of the way. A second, sorry about that. Following it all the way to where it comes up from the layout, which is right there. And that's powering the first section track block on the layout. So in closing out this video, I had mentioned early on what I do with this gap that we have here in the track once we make that cut. As you can see, the gap is really pretty minimal, especially when you use the pretty thin Dremel cutoff wheel that I use. And it leaves this gap here for the track block. So you've got one here and then you've got one on the other end that isolates that center rail. But if you want, you can leave it. You can leave it that way. What I normally do is I'll take some hot glue and I'll fill in that gap. And then once the hot glue is cured completely and it's pretty hard, I'll go in and I'll trim the hot glue and I'll form it to look like it's part of the rail. And then I'll either paint over it. You could even use a permanent black marker, which actually blends pretty well. But it'll hide that gap, and when you fill it in with hot glue, it's not going to act as a bridge for the electric. It's obviously not a conductive material, but you can hide the gaps by doing that. You may have another way to do it. Some folks will use oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the insulator pins you can use. There's several that are out there, but I just like to use the hot glue because it'll fill in the entire gap, and that's just the way that I go about it. It's pretty simple to do, but that is something that I do when I'm done with these cuts. But you can really leave it if you like. But that's pretty much it for this video. I figured I would just do, like I said, an unedited, unfiltered, straight off the cuff type video on how I'm doing these track blocks. And I guess that sums it up, and I will see you guys there in the next video.